It is time to begin our webinar, and I'll start the recording. If you don't have the chat box open on your screen, under the Zoom controls, probably toward the bottom of your screen, there is an option to click on chat, and that's where we're going to be sharing questions, resources, and ideas. So I encourage you to open up the chat and to be active participants today. This is a discussion that we're having together, not just something that you're being lectured at. I want you to be part of the learning and teaching community. My name is Dr. Sandra Weaver-Ferricks. I am part of the Click to Science PD team. I'm a science education specialist, and I focus on informal science learning or out-of-school science learning. Our topic today is about computer science and the growing demand for computer science activities in after-school time. And the goal of today's webinar is to help you understand what are the critical features, what's really important to include in your program, and some different ideas about how you can integrate computer science and computational thinking into an after-school environment and create a computationally rich environment for the children in your program. We're going to be using resources today from code.org, one of the free resources that you can use in your program. We're also going to be looking at some of the resources that Click to Science PD offers that can help your staff develop the skills and the confidence to facilitate really great computer science experiences for your program. We have about 50 people joining us on the webinar today. So I want to take a little bit of time to get to know you before we get started. And I have a couple of polls that I want you to respond to. The first poll is about computer science in your program. And you can vote by clicking on the screen. And I just want to know whether computer science is something you're doing or thinking about doing very soon, and whether you feel like you have the resources in terms of people to be really effective at that. Give a few more minutes for people to respond, and then I will share the results with you. So it looks like in a lot of the programs that are represented today, there's somebody, at least one or two people, who are pretty comfortable with computer science, but not something that is universal across the program. And it may be that you don't need that. If you have one or two people who are comfortable with computer science, that may be all that you need to really have an effective program. But there may be things that you can do to help everyone in your program feel a little bit more comfortable with this, and to make it something that everybody can be a part of. We have one more poll, and this one is about the types of programming that you're doing. Again, we'll give about a minute or a little less to respond to that. One of the options on this poll is other, if there's ideas that I haven't thought of. So if you do have other things you're doing to encourage computer science in your program, share those in the chat box so we can all learn from them. Oh, I did not allow to check more than one option. I'll make sure and fix that for next time. All right, just a little bit more time for people to finish up. So there are a lot of programs that are doing coding. I'm glad to hear that. And also the unplugged activities. I wasn't sure how many people would be familiar with even what that term meant. So we will be talking about all of these strategies as things that you can do in your program, but this helps me to get a better idea where we're at. So I really appreciate you participating in that. All right. So I want to start with this idea of computational thinking. That's a term that I was not really familiar with until we started developing resources at Click to Science to support computer science. And once I understood what it meant, it helped me think about new and different ways that we could include computer science in after-school programming that went beyond what my traditional perspective or point of view had been. Computational thinking describes the skills or approaches that computer scientists use to solve complex problems. It's about a systematic problem-solving approach. But there's a lot of things about computational thinking that we all use, not just computer scientists. And so once I understood that, it made it a lot easier for me to think about ways that we could fit computer science into the sort of things that we regularly do in our programming. So we're going to start by trying to understand what computational thinking means. And our first resource to share with you about that is a video from code.org. Oh, just a moment. All right, let's watch this video together.
The lesson on computational thinking is intended to teach you how to take a big, difficult problem and break it down into several simpler problems. The goal of this lesson is to write a set of instructions that someone can follow to draw one of the monsters included in this lesson plan. Students will break into groups to write instructions, and then they'll switch them with another group that will have to draw the monster. Groups will write instructions using the 4 steps of computational thinking: decomposition, pattern location, abstraction, and algorithms. First, groups will decompose the task, which means make a game plan. Then, they'll look for patterns between all the monsters in the catalog. When they come across differences between the monsters, they'll abstract out or remove those details. For instance, one monster in the catalog has Vegetas eyes, and another has Spritum eyes. But they both have eyes, so we can write a line that says, this monster has blank eyes. So students will be able to write a set of instructions, called an algorithm, that lists the monster's parts with blanks for what the style should be. This is the set of instructions they'll pass to other students to recreate their very own monster.
We're going to be looking a little bit more at this activity as well in the webinar today. But first, we want to think about those practices that she mentioned in the video, the computational thinking practices and what exactly that means. And as I go through these and kind of summarize what they are, I want you to think about how you're using these practices in your everyday life. So the first one is decomposition. And that's breaking a big problem down into smaller problems and hopefully easier to solve problems. Pattern recognition is observing patterns, trends, or regularities in a problem, in information, in data. Abstraction is identifying and extracting or pulling out the relevant information that helps define your problem and makes it easier to get to the core of the information or problem that you're trying to solve. And an algorithm is an ordered series of instructions for solving the problem at hand and similar problems, or for doing a task. You can think of an algorithm for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's the steps that you're going to take to solve the problem or complete the task. And usually there's more than one way you can do it. So there's not just a single algorithm, but the goal is to come up with the best algorithm or the most efficient one to solve your problem. And a good algorithm is going to solve more than one problem, not just the one problem at hand, but related problems as well. So now in that chat box, again, and mine closed itself when I turned the video off, how do you use these practices in your day-to-day problem solving? What are some things that you do that you kind of think fit into this model? And I'll share one of my ideas as well. I see a lot of people like me like to make lists, and using decomposition to break down a problem and make a list is a skill that I use a lot. Patterns and emails, I like that idea. I hadn't thought about that, but I think that that is something that I'm doing. But now that I think about it, it helps me to think about how I could solve that problem and make some of my emailing a little bit easier by using pattern recognition. So when you start, at least for me, when I started thinking about computational thinking in these terms and realized that I'm using these practices, it made it easier for me to think of different ways that I could incorporate computational thinking into after-school activities. And that's what we want to think about today, is really how can we make this fun and appropriate for our after-school programs. Our learning goals for today's webinar are to learn about the research behind computational thinking. I'll share some critical ideas with you, and then afterwards we'll post those research articles so you can find them if you want to learn more. We also want to develop some concrete strategies that we can use to create a computationally rich environment in after-school programs, and then prepare to integrate computational thinking into an after-school program with or without computers. So there's a lot of ways that you can teach computer science without actually using computers, because not every program has access to a computer lab or laptops. The resources that we share from 4-H or code.org will also include as a handout with the recording of the webinar, so that you can find those resources, and you can also use the recording itself with your own staff to do a little bit of professional development, or to share with others, or just to come back and find those resources when you're ready to use them. Let's start with the research. Digital technology has really changed the way we work in industry, in finance, in media, in medicine, in commerce. And so there's a real need for computational thinking in a lot of different areas. And the need for computational thinkers is what's pushing the desire by after-school programs to incorporate more computer science and computational thinking into their programming. And there's three important ideas that we're going to take from research about computational thinking that are particularly relevant to doing this in after school. And the first is that computational thinking is best developed in playful contexts. And that describes a lot of after-school programs really well. We're also going to look at the use, modify, create progression of experiences that has been shown to build computational thinking skills, and think about how that can fit into what we're doing in our programs. And we're going to talk about what it means to build a low floor and a high ceiling in computer science. So, a little bit from the research. Computational thinking is a way of thinking and practicing interactive problem solving and modeling with computers. Researchers advocate that young people practice computational thinking in playful contexts where they can develop personal projects, for example, creating their own video games or building robots, and that they have the opportunity to share and discuss their constructions with others. That sort of environment seems to be the most effective in introducing computer science to a wide variety of young people and engaging them. And I think to our advantage, it's just the sort of environment that we create in after-school programming. So what you need to emphasize when you're doing computer science is creating, playing, collaborating with others. These are the aspects of computer science that are likely to engage most of the students in your program and help prepare them for the workplace that is very collaborative as well. The nice thing is this doesn't require a lot of expertise in coding or computer science. Instead, it relies on the process of facilitating exploration rather than teaching computer science. And that's important to keep in mind, that that's what you're trying to do. It's not your role necessarily to be the computer scientist or the teacher, but to facilitate this process of exploration in a playful way. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about was that cycle of use, modify, create. And this is what the process looks like. And this has been shown to support really deep computational thinking practices. And in this progression, students interact first with an existing computational artifact. That may be an existing program, a robot instructions that they're following, or a game that they're playing, something that someone else has created that's not their own. And they interact with that, and they begin to develop their computational thinking skills by modifying and refining someone else's project and making it their own. So as they go from use to modify and create, they're taking something that wasn't theirs and making it their own through their modifications and redesigning of the project. If you've ever used Scratch programming, Scratch uses this progression of use, modify, and create as a great starting place to build computational thinking, to gain skills and confidence. At the same time, they're developing ideas and growing to where they can create their own project, and they become creators with technology, not just consumers of technology. And the third concept that I wanted to share is the idea of creating low floors and high ceilings. And this has been one of the guiding principles in developing tools for computational thinking. So it's something you want to look for when you're deciding what tools to bring into your program. It essentially means that it should be easy for a beginner to cross the threshold and start creating things. To start that use part of the progression should be very easy. That's the low floor. It's easy to walk in. No barriers to getting started. But at the same time, a really effective tool is also going to be powerful enough to keep providing new opportunities to be creative as students develop their skills. And that's where the high ceiling comes in. Something that is flexible enough that they can try new things. When they get to the create stage, they can do something new and different. They don't have to simply replicate what they've already seen. So keep those three principles in mind as we move forward. We want to see something that's playful, that gives a progression of experiences with low floors and high ceilings. Now, the click to science skill that we focus on in developing the first part of computational thinking is developing a STEM identity. So now I want to talk a little bit about how research on developing a STEM identity is an important part of building computational thinking skills. When we talk about building an identity, we're talking about helping young people see themselves as someone who learns about, uses, and contributes to STEM. And that goes back to that use, modify, and create progression. We want them to be at that create stage, or to be reaching toward that create stage, where they are a contributor toward STEM. And specifically, today we're going to be focusing on strategies to help you see themselves as someone that is a computational thinker, who has the practices, the problem-solving strategies that we talked about at the beginning of today's webinar. And identity grows through positive experiences that develop skills. As youth progress from knowing how to use computational thinking to enjoying using those skills and knowing that they can use those skills to solve problems, they're becoming a computational thinker. When they see themselves and value themselves as a computational thinker, that's when they've developed that sense of identity. And that opens up for them the opportunities that having these skills provides. It opens a lot of career pathways and a lot of resources that they have access to as a computational thinker that they may not have had access to without this set of skills. It gives them opportunity to be a creator, to solve problems, and to consider different career pathways. And the way we can accomplish this in our out-of-school programming is through providing that series or progression of experiences, keeping it positive and playful, and also through intentional planning and positive messaging that we're giving to young people about their skills that they're developing. And to see what this looks like, I have a video from Click to Science that I will share, and we're going to think about how you can do this in an after-school environment. In this video, the facilitator is working with a group of English language learners. and introducing the idea of computational thinking. His goal in this activity is for them to develop their computational skills and their identity as a computational thinker. So in the video, watch for how he supports themselves and seeing themselves as computational thinking. And notice the extra activity that he uses that is designed to reinforce vocabulary for these English language learners and to help develop their sense of identity. That's toward the beginning of the video. And then you'll see them getting into the game or the activity, a game with no instructions. And think about, as we watch the second half of the video, what exactly it is that they're learning through that that game. As I said, the video we're sharing is from clicktosciencepd.org. Let me make it a little bit bigger here.
You're a computational thinker.
You're a computational thinker.
Awesome. To form STEM identity, the youth need to be able to form that opinion of themselves, and they need to internalize it. So how does that happen? So one is awareness. So knowing that these things are out there is definitely helps form identity as a kind of a passive, that thing exists, thus I could pursue it at some time. But to go beyond that, we also have to have some of that identity formed within the students. Once I became a partner with Jay here, I'm going to pick one of those words and I'm going to say decompose, break a problem into smaller pieces. I'm going to say a definition, and then Jay's going to choose one. So just choose any one of those four, and you're going to do it over and over and over. Okay, which one? And what's the definition?
So you can follow to finish a task.
Boom. All right, so we've both said a definition. We're going to say, you are a computational thinker. Say it to me. And then I go find another partner. Right? So then I Today, during this lesson, I happen to have the students orally say, I am, and then whatever that identity is around, and multiple times, in multiple ways, in multiple contexts. So with the success, I wanted them to say, I am the computational thinker. So, what do I do first? I need to choose an animal. So this is that algorithm. Okay, so I'm going to choose puppy. Right, what do I do next?
Roll again.
Oh, okay. And then I write it down? I'm figuring out the pattern here. Yeah.
And you gotta go again.
And again, okay.
That's one.
And a two.
Then you got one, so you're gonna put a
Thank you.
cell phone. Then,
Cell phone, okay.
Then you got a two again, so you're gonna put a cell phone, a blue cell phone in his tail.
On the horse's tail, was there an example? Okay, that's what the cell phone needs to look like. Blue cell phone on the puppy's tail. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you just gave me a set of instructions. Do you remember what that word's called? Algorithm. So you gave me an algorithm to solve this problem, right? To follow these instructions. You guys are great computational thinkers. Can you all look at each other and be like, I'm a computational thinker? Like you're fixing your hair? Yeah. So reinforcement of that helps them internalize that as a way for them to begin to solve problems.
Then a blanket. Then a blanket.
Nailed it. Yeah.
I need to draw a blank on my blank blank.
You nailed it. You're a computer scientist. Even if they don't become a computer scientist, being able to be a multifaceted person, be able to have multiple skills, this would remain with them, that they become a problem solver. It's a transferable skill, and having them feel that inside them by saying it, I think is super powerful.
Now, I want you to share in the chat box, what did you notice in the video? Just share a couple observations as I put the link into the chat box about where you can find that video if you want to look at it again. So what was happening in that activity where Dagan was trying to reinforce the vocabulary and develop their sense of identity? And how did that connect to what they were doing in the activity itself? One of the things I really like about this video is I think that Dagan has captured the complexity of after-school learning. That fun is important. Being able to physically move is an important part of learning for children in after school. They've been sitting at desks all day and they need to get up and move. He incorporates a lot of positive reinforcement and collaborating, working together to build those social emotional learning. He knows that English language learners may struggle with this very specific vocabulary that may use words that they're familiar with in a different way than what they've seen previously. And so he's using this activity to check their understanding, to build their connections with one another, to practice the vocabulary, all of these things at the same time. And that's what we're doing in after school, but sometimes it's really hard for us at Click to Science to capture that in a video. And I think that he's done a good job here in creating the sort of experience that we can see how it's fun and it's teaching, and that's what we want to see happening in an after-school program. Now let me go back to the PowerPoint because we're going to be looking a little bit more closely at this activity that he has them do. All right, here we go. So the game with no instructions is an example of what we mentioned earlier of an unplugged activity. It happens to come from code.org, which has an excellent collection of unplugged activities. Those are activities that teach computer science and computational thinking, but you don't need computers in order to do them. And that makes them really well suited to after school. And also, like in this activity, there's opportunities to build in other things that we're trying to accomplish in our after-school program, like social emotional learning, connections to one another. All of those things can be incorporated into these unplugged activities. And they're fun. They have a sense of being a game. This one is, in fact, exactly a game. So a great place for after school. So now we're going to watch another video that focuses on the activity itself, this game with no instructions. So pay attention in this video to a little bit more about what is happening in the game. And I want you to think about these thinking practices and see if you see the children using them in the game. So keep in mind decomposition, pattern recognition, abstraction, and algorithm, and see if you see those as part of the activity in the next video. And for linking, this video comes from the same location, the same URL as the ones we showed previously. It is simply the first part of that video, the overview of the activity.
Okay.
What number left?
Yep. The objective of the game without rules is to provide the youth an opportunity to intentionally take all 4 parts of computational thinking and apply them and get to that end goal so they can see it all together as a method. We start with decompose, so we break down the problem. And then we look at any types of patterns. Another step is abstraction, so that's taking out all of those differences and really taking a look at what might be able to be applied in different ways. And then finally we're looking at creating algorithm. And so we're creating that algorithm, that list of steps to solve that problem. We started with an activity that was very challenging and nearly impossible in a very purposeful way.
So are you ready for a really big challenge?
Yeah.
So you can't use paper and you can't use pencil for this challenge. You have to just use your brain, all right? Sum all of the numbers between 1 and 200 in your head. You have 30 seconds. Are you ready? Ready? All right. Think about it. Go.
And so the point of doing that is to set up that things are challenging and we need tools in order to solve them. So after the kickoff activity to get them to start seeing this, we started getting into a game that had no rules, with no instructions.
Sometimes when we are on the computer, we don't have instructions and we need to figure out what's going on. That's what we're doing. So the first part, the suggestion is to circle the sections of words that are identical from player to player.
I facilitated kind of a back and forth between the students in order to get them to start seeing that they can break down the problem.
Yeah, so first, let's see if we can find any patterns. So if we read that first sentence, take a look at that first sentence. I choose. Yeah, I choose, I choose. Is there anything else here? What's the same in these two sentences? What can I circle just like on your activity?
I have 3 orange cats and I have two orange fish.
Awesome. So our next step is underline the words that change from player to player. So out of these sentences, what's different?
2 and 3, fish and cat.
Okay, 2 and 3, and fish and cat. And then third, on this bottom part, you're going to write a script. What would a computer do in order to play this game?
So they completed that game using computational thinking and all 4 areas. At the end of that lesson, they had to write that script, that algorithm, in order to have someone else play the game with them.
We have to choose an animal first.
All right, first step, choose an animal. In my algorithm, that's what would go first, right? Choose an animal. Then what do I do?
And then you roll a dice to know what color. To know a color. And then you roll again, and then you get a 6. You have to get, if you got a 2, you have to get a blue bow.
I'm going to see if I can decompose. I'm going to break it apart. There is a yellow cupcake on a tiger's tail. So that means a 2 was rolled, a 4 was rolled, and a 3 was rolled. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Awesome. So I can tell, I can go backwards and forwards based on what you did. You guys are awesome.
So at the end of the activity, they had the instructions that didn't exist before.
So now this time, what I want you to share in the chat box is how those computational thinking practices are embedded into the game that they're playing. So Dakin talked about this at the beginning. He said that they started out by decomposing the problem, and then they looked for patterns, and when they were circling and underlining the words, that's when they were finding those patterns and deciding what was really important. That was abstraction, pulling out the relevant information. What I love most about this is the algorithm that they create is a game that they can play together, and the way they test their algorithm is they play with other people at their table. So it's building in all of those skills and doing it in a way that makes it fun and keeps everybody engaged. And it really fits the wide variety of learners that are typical in an after-school program, which may not all be at the same age or grade level, or even at the same reading or thinking levels. So we saw an example of how you can use an activity like this in after school. Code.org is a great resource to find these sort of unplugged activities. But our goal is not just to have an occasional activity that teaches computer science thinking skills or computational thinking. What we want to do is create computationally rich environments in after school. And so what do I mean by that? A computationally rich environment is an environment that encourages students to inspect, manipulate, tinker with objects, tinker with ideas. And there's lots of different ways that you can do this. There's lots of different things you can bring into your program to create computationally rich environments. Again, we want to look for those resources that have a low floor and a high ceiling that are easy to get started with. Code.org and Scratch are two examples of that are very easy to get started. They have a lot of support built into them for the leader as well as for the learner. If you have other sources that you think are really good opportunities to get started with creating computationally rich environments, share those in the chat box so we can all benefit from them. Look for experiences where learners get the opportunity to make decisions, to collaborate, and to solve problems together. Look for experiences where they can progress through experiences that become increasingly complex. So they can go through that use, modify, create progression. We also want to be sure that the resources that we schedule. Okay, I'm going to stop for just a second because there's an important chat here. In the chat box, you can chat with all panelists, which is me, or you can chat with all panelists and attendees. I'm seeing the discussion happening in the chat, but Shirley says that she's not. So if you could just make sure and check in when you're typing in the chat box that it says all panelists and attendees, that will help make sure that that gets to everybody. And while I'm stopped, I will provide an example and share the resources that I'm talking about, and I'll share some more in a little bit. And also these will be collected on the handout that goes with the recording. Okay, step back. Experiences where learners make decisions, collaborate, solve problems, and can progress through increasingly complex experiences. That's how you get the low floor and high ceiling. But another thing to keep in mind is that you want to look for resources that support equity and are sustainable. We don't want to send the message that computer science is for some of the children in our program, but not everyone. So that equity message is really important at this point. So one of the resources that may help you with this is SciGirls, and they have some great research-based practices that help engage girls in STEM and are also effective with all learners. For example, research shows that all learners, especially girls, are motivated by projects that they find personally relevant and meaningful. Girls enjoy hands-on, open-ended projects. Well, boys enjoy that too. So when you can focus on those sorts of experiences that are likely to engage girls and boys in an equitable way, you're going to have the most impact and positive outcomes in your program. Makey Makey is one of the examples in the chat box. That's a wonderful example of a resource that is hands-on and open-ended, that allows for a lot of creativity and is engaging for all learners. The other thing I mentioned is sustainability. Projects that can be led by your own staff and don't rely on external partners are going to be more sustainable. Not that you shouldn't bring in those external partners. If you have a university computer science department that has graduate students who'd like to be involved with your program, encourage them to be part of your programming. But also look for those opportunities where you can add to that resources that are led by your own staff, so that they can use that. And look for resources where the training for leaders is built right into the resource. Great comments in the chat box, so I encourage you to look for those. And finally, look for resources that are collaborative and playful, where they can develop their own personal projects, like creating their own apps, writing a video game, or designing a video game, building a robot. And create an environment where they're encouraged to share, to discuss, to talk to each other about what they're doing. And be intentional about keeping it playful. Okay, let's see, what are some resources? Robotics, Lego, Vex. Those are really easy to get started with. Makey Makey is a great resource. Spheros is another one. Code.org. National Youth Science Day. That's one that I wanted to point out too. There's a series of resources from 4-H that are free. They're called National Youth Science Day Challenges. And the one this year is called Game Changers. I had to look, it's on the desk on the other side. There's one on wearable technology. There's one on ecobots. Trying to think, maps and apps is another one. So there's a whole series of these National Youth Science Day challenges that are free downloads. Drone discovery. These are great resources, and to find them, you just need to Google National Youth Science Day or 4-H National Youth Science Day, and you can download all of the resources for free. Some of them have kits available as well, but you don't even need the kit and not all of them are still available. But this year, thanks Kim, she's shared the link there. The challenge is Game Changers, and it's about how young people can make a change in their world using computer science. And it brings together citizenship and activism along with using computer science, and it's Scratch-based. So that is a resource to look for, Game Changers, and that will be included in the resources to go with this. All right, we have just a few minutes left, so I want to share some key ideas with you to take away. 4 takeaways I want to be sure I've emphasized in today's webinar. First, I started out by describing computational thinking as a way of thinking and solving problems, and strategies that we can use every day. And share that with your learners as well. This is not something you use just when you're at a computer. You use these thinking practices every day. We also focused on how we can help youth develop a STEM identity through that use, make, create cycle of positive experiences that build their skills and confidence as the challenges get more complex and they get more ownership of what they're creating. And we saw what these things could look like in the video that Dagan let us film to see what computer science in an after-school program can look like. The goal is not just to have a coding club or a robotics club, but to create a computationally rich environment in your after-school program where there are opportunities for students to inspect, manipulate, and tinker with objects and ideas, where they're using their problem solving and their creativity together. And you can do this through experiences that are collaborative, that include decision making, solving problems, and use that progression of increasingly complex challenges. As a group, we shared a lot of resources that are available for you to use, and I will capture all of those from our chat box and include them in the handout that will be posted with the webinar of today's recording. So the recording of today's webinar. So you can come back by tomorrow afternoon. It should be posted, and you can see what those resources were that were shared in the chat box. And I'll also find links to go with them, so you can click right on them in the PDF and find the resources. Some other resources that I will include with that are links to the video and the activity Game with No Instructions that we saw in today's webinar, so you can use those right away if you want to. You've kind of seen what it looks like. It's a great way to start using that activity. I'll also include some research on developing computational thinking and on making sure the activities that you have are equitable, that they engage all your learners in computational thinking, and they don't send the message that some people will be computer scientists and some people won't. Computer science is a very equitable field. Well, it's a field that needs a lot of different thinkers, and it needs people who approach things from different directions. So diversity is a real strength in computer science. And also, I will share the links to all of these resources from Click to Science and the resources that you've shared here today that you can use to develop the confidence and competence in your staff. Quick boost for students to share among themselves. So we want to look for resources that don't require a lot of direct instruction, but can be made to work with a large group and with an instructor that doesn't have a lot of confidence or skills initially. So I will be sure and make a note when I share those resources which ones are really easy to pick up and go. I think Scratch is an example of that. You may be limited by how many computers you have. Scratch is you do need a laptop or a computer to do it, but one of the nice things is the tutorials, the videos are built into the program, so it can be a very open instruction where the students are kind of directing themselves and teaching each other as they try out new ideas. So we'll make a note of that in the resources that we share. Finally, before I finish, I want to tell you a little bit about the Click to Science project and share an opportunity that's coming up with you. Click to Science is a website, essentially, of resources that is designed for site directors, trainers, and coaches who work with staff in after-school programs and other out-of-school or informal science learning. It's specifically designed for that out-of-school environment. It's not it is used some by teachers, but it's really designed for out of school. And there's resources that you can use with staff for training and developing their skills and their confidence, and also resources that individual learners can use on their own to build their skills and confidence. So I invite you to visit our website at clicktosciencepd.org and sign up there for the monthly newsletter so you get an announcement each month of what the topic for the webinar is, and we'll know when we release new resources. We are currently working with NSF to develop resources specifically around computer science and building confidence in staff and in after-school programs to do computer science. So if you sign up for that newsletter, you'll know when those are available and ready for you. And the opportunity that I wanted to share is that there is a National Trainer Institute, which will be on November 6th through 8th at a beautiful retreat center in Nebraska, which is where I am. The Trainer Institutes are opportunities for site directors, program leaders, program coordinators, and trainers to develop their skills in coaching staff and volunteers. So if you have that leadership role, this is an opportunity that you can develop your own skills. It's November 6th through 8th. It's about 2.5-day training, interactive, research-based experiences where you learn best practices in STEM professional development and get lots of experience working with a cohort of others who are interested in this and building your confidence in leading, planning, training. And you'll also learn about all the resources that Click to Science has online and other resources as well, and how you can implement the Click to Science model of professional learning in your program and connect with colleagues from across the country. So it's a great opportunity, and it'll be closing up not immediately. I think registration is open through mid-October, but I wanted to let you know about it so you can get it on your calendar, November 6th through 8th, and you can get registered at the link here. Thank you once again for joining today, and if you have any questions, please follow up with me. I will type my email in the chat box.